Hey guys, in this week's tip, we're going to take a look at one of those cool little tools within SMS, the price generators. On tap, we're going to show you how to utilize these price generators to help automate price updates when you're working with cost change batches, especially those ones that you import from vendors. We're also going to take a look about combining this little tool with targeted gross margin within SMS. We're going to show you how to use it with the TGM, without the TGM, and a combination of items that have TGM and don't. Sounds complicated, but it really isn't. So without further ado, let's hop in. All right, so first things first. I'm in SMS Pro and I'm in a batch item maintenance view. Now this is not the typical or simple view that I normally start with in these videos. So one thing first I want to say, this is not a tutorial on how to use batches. I'm going to assume the watchers of these videos already use batches today and already know how to do that. If you need help with batches, just holler at me and I'll be happy to do other videos on the how-to of those. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some of these tools that we're going to use today. All right, so the way this particular video tip came about is a prospect said, hey, I'm going to be importing a bunch of costs from a bunch of different vendors. And when I do that, I don't want to necessarily have to mess around with pricing at the item level or even at the sub-department level. I want the system to help me out with the pricing so long as I give it a margin that I'm looking to work with. Okay, we can do that, no problem at all. So in my view here, I just got the basic batch view and I simulated importing in this cost batch here from one of my vendors. I'm going to go ahead and launch that batch and you can see I've got, I think 29 items here in this particular batch. And all of them as we scroll through here are going to have the updates right over here in the batch all changes window of what the cost is going to change to. So this window shows what the cost is going to change to on 12/26. And now your cost window, your typical cost window shows what the cost in the system is right now. So let's go back up here to the first item and start stepping through a little bit of this. So as we step through this, I do want to point out that there are two very important windows you want to have open. The first is future cost. The second is future price. Future cost is obvious pretty much because you're working with a cost batch here. Future price we're going to need as we update the prices based off the new costing that's coming in from that vendor import. So go ahead and open it up so we don't get that little goofy error box. All right, so this is one of those videos where we reach one of those forks in the road. There are two paths that we could take from this point. So let's assume that you haven't done any sort of work with importing costs from your vendors and you're getting ready to work with your reseller to set up a little script to import those cost batches. This is what you're going to do in that case. You're going to work with your reseller and instruct him or her to go ahead and set up that import, but make the batch type an open batch. That's the first way to do it. Now the second way to do it is to do a normal cost batch, a future cost batch, which probably most of you that are using SMS and that have worked with a reseller to create an import, that's probably what you have is a future cost batch. So you ask, what's the difference between the two types? Well, it's pretty simple. An open batch allows us to do a ton of different changes in one batch. One basic batch number, batch header, whatever the heck you want to call it. We got one batch and all kinds of changes, cost changes, price changes, POS changes, all that sort of stuff can be done in one batch. If you already have SMS and your reseller has created an import for you that brings this in as a cost batch, exactly like what I have here. If I expand this a little bit, one more time here, you can see I got it as a future cost batch. If that's what you have today, all you're going to do is create a new batch, which is a future price batch to match with this cost batch. Either way, it's the process from here is the same. It just depends on the type of batch you're going to use. You're either going to add your pricing to the batch that's imported, or if you have a future cost batch like I do here, we're just going to create a future price batch to match this baby up. So in my case, and for the purpose of this demonstration, we're working with a future cost batch here. I need to add a price batch to match. So I'm going to go ahead and add future price. I'm going to put in my descriptor. I'm just going to paste it in there. Price batch to match. You can see it's a future price batch. I'm also going to set the start date to match the future cost batch date, which is 12/26. Go ahead and put that there. I'm going to toggle out so now that you can see both batches here on the screen. All right, so to get this party started, we're going to go ahead just to make sure we didn't fat finger anything, highlight our cost batch, go ahead and hit the start the batch here so all the items for that particular batch show up over here in the browser. We can count them again. We got our 29. We're in good shape. So now we're ready to go ahead and update future pricing, our retail price in this scenario, based on those cost changes that we imported in from our vendor. So at this point in the demonstration, when I was with that prospect, I was ready to show him how easy it was to set up pricing based off our new costing. Then it happened. It always does. It never fails. The retailer, or the prospect in this case, hit us with something out of the blue and said, hey, I want to utilize targeted gross margin on certain items, and targeted gross margin items may be in this particular batch. Well, let me see here. This item, no targeted gross margin. But if I come down here and, oh lordy, look at that. This retailer wants to use targeted gross margin on select items to better manage his pricing overall. And in this particular case, on this imported batch, I've got a mixture of items without TGM. That stuff's easy. But now, oh, look at this. We got targeted gross margin in here with rounding rules. How the heck are we going to do this? So we're sitting there in a live demonstration. How the heck are you going to do this? And then it hits you. Hey, we can do this. We got this cool little tool over here called the filter. And you know what? That filter does some magic. So let me show you exactly how to do it. All right, so to make some magic happen over here in our filter, what we're going to do is we're going to use the filter to call all items in batch 68, which matches our cost batch. Then I'm going to hit the little plus sign up here in our filter, and it's going to add another little search field here that I can combine by hitting this and here. By default, it's going to say and. So what I'm saying is and. I want to look for batch 68, and now what I'm going to do is take my cursor, make sure you're on an item without a TGM in this case, go over to TGM, retail, place your cursor right there. That's where that TGM would be if there was one. So place your cursor there, come back to your filter, and go way down here to the bottom of this little doohickey, which is basically pointing to the SIL field number for TGM retail. Hit that. Make sure it says SIL field for TGM retail equals, and type the word null. Now, null, for those of us here in the southern states, that means it's empty. So now what we're doing is we're looking at cost batch where the TGM field is empty. Go ahead and apply that filter, execute it. Well, nothing happened. Well, sure it did. Come right over here to the browser, hit count, and we can see, remember we had 29? Now we only got 27. So 27 of our 29 items don't have a TGM. That's pretty cool, and that's what we're going to utilize to make this price update. All right, so at this point, we're ready to rock. We've got 27 items in our browser window here without a TGM, but we have cost changes coming that are effective 12/26. We want to go ahead and update that pricing. So here's one of those little steps where that fork earlier that we talked about kind of happens again. So if you have an open batch, you're okay. It's going to stay highlighted right here on cost batch. But if you did have to create a future price batch, make sure before we go to this next part, go ahead and highlight this new batch that we made. You highlight, see how it highlighted, highlight the price batch. Now, what we're going to do, come way over here to our future cost table. The future cost up here that's being imported in from the vendor is already here in our future cost table. It's because we imported it. So now what we want to do to make the price update is hit this little thing right up here that says copy all records, or copy this record to all items. We want to hit that. It looks like in here. Go ahead and hit that thing, and it's going to pop up this little window. And what it's going to say is you want to change all 27 items in the browser right up here. Yep, that's what we want to do. So go ahead and type yes. Now come right down here, and this is probably unchecked here out of the box. So come down to generate retail price. Go ahead and check it. Now, if you look at or read SMS user help, you're going to see a step in there that says, go ahead at this point and apply only changes but create a record if needed. I'm not going to do that. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is if I have multiple cost records from different vendors, it will create a new price change based on all the cost records for the item. In this case, we've got a batch from one particular vendor with the cost changes for just that vendor. I only want to change pricing for that particular vendor's cost record. So I'm not going to do create record, I'm just going to apply only changes. Then this beautiful generate price window opens. Let me show you how to use it. So this tool's pretty easy to use and it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go over a couple things here just to make sure. We're going to target in a multi-store. This could vary. If you're a multiple store, work with your reseller and they can help you on this. We're changing price level 1 because in this case, I've only got one particular price level. You could change all price levels if that's what you wanted for this particular item, but in this case, it's just one. Now your costing section here, if you don't know what this stuff is here and you're not an accountant or a bean counter, work with your reseller on this. Most of the time it's going to be base cost, so go ahead and leave that. You can see it's going to go ahead and show you what the cost is based off the future cost change. If we were to do the math, $21.99 divided by 14, the unit price should be this number right here. So in this case, remember, we don't have targeted gross margins already established for these 27 items. So we're going to tell the system what the margin is going to be. And so it makes a change. I can see right back here my margin at 198 is 23%. So I'm going to say all the items without a TGM, I want a 30% margin. You can see it's going to show you the price right here that math works out to be. But I'm also going to say round it to the nearest 9. So you can see 229, 30% margin, round it to the nearest 9. Now the next step is pretty darn simple, but it's a very important, so make sure you pay attention. Come right over here. Where are we sending this price to? we're sending it to future retail. So go ahead and hit that little radio button right there. We're good to go at this point. All we have to do it for all 27 items is come over here and hit global. When we hit global, it's going to go ahead and create the future price record 229 for each one of those items in the browser. That's pretty cool. Now what's going to happen on 12/26 when your store opens? The cost is going to update on 12/26 to $21.99 a case, 14 in that case. It's whatever it was, $1.57 or whatever each. It's also going to on 12/26 create a new retail price in this case of $229 for all of these 27 items. It won't be $229 for all 27 items. It's going to be based off of cost. So if I come down to this particular item, you can see the price changes based off its particular cost. That is pretty darn cool. So I do want to point out one thing here as you're going through these items and you want to check to make sure that the price changes and all that good stuff. And you're going to see that the price change is based off of whatever that particular math works out to be. The one thing I want to point out is because we're on the price batch, don't be real concerned with the future cost table here at this particular point in the scenario, and it's not changing. The reason it's not changing is because we don't have one batch. Remember when we talked about open batch versus future price, future cost? If you got an open batch, you would see both updates here. But because we're working on the price batch only, the only thing that's going to change is our future price. So enough with that disclaimer. Let's go ahead and finish the other half of this equation of updating the pricing with those two items that had a TGM already in the system. Okay, so the last part of this is to go ahead and update the pricing for those two items that had TGM already established. We're going to come back to our batch header window. We're going to highlight the cost batch. We're going to go ahead and execute that cost batch, and I think we're going to bring in, yep, all 29 again. The reason we had to do that, remember, we have two different batches. Our price batch is just for retail price. Our cost batch has all the stuff, all 29 items that are coming in from that vendor import. Now what we're going to do to get to those items that only have TGM, or those two items that have TGM already established, we're going to come right back up here to our filter. We're going to go ahead and put our cursor over here on TGM retail, put it right there, come over to our filter, drop down way down here, hit that little thing that says basically if the SIL field number F49 for retail TGM is greater than or equal to 0, pull in those items. Execute that filter. I've got those two items, those last two. You can see if I highlight 25 TGM on that one, 20 on that one. So no smoke and mirrors there. All we're doing is bringing in the items where the TGM has already been established, and we're going to say it's greater than or equal to 0. So if this was 0, it would still pull that in. And maybe it's 0 because it's something you want to work on down the road. I don't know. But in this case, this is the process to do it. We've got two different methods, two different queries to bring in TGM, non-TGM. Now to change the price here, it's going to be very, very similar. What did we do last time? Well, we got to come over here to our batch header and make sure we're on the price batch. So just move that. Remember, it highlights, 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 highlights. Go come to that, price batch. Now come back to our future cost table. We're going to hit this little thing that looks like an ear. So all this is exactly the same. We're only affecting two items because that's all I got. I'm going to type the word yes. I'm going to make sure retail price is generated right there. Make sure that little radio button is ticked. Hit apply only changes. Now in this scenario, what you're going to have to do, I'll move this window over here. You can see our TGM for that item is 20. We're going to come down here, and the only reason it's doing this is because we did one after the other. So come right down here, hit reset. Okay, perfect. So what this 54.69 divided by 24 must be 227.88. We're going to base it off our base cost like before. We're going to send it to future retail price, and I'm going to hit global. And it's going to, what it's going to do is create those price changes based on these items. That is pretty darn cool. It's basing it off of this targeted gross margin right here and this new updated cost. We didn't have to input the margin before because it's already there with the TGM. That's a system that allows us to use TGM items with non-TGM items all within the same cost batch. So one last thing before we go, you can come right back over here to your batch header, highlight the price batch, go ahead and execute that filter, and you can see all 29 items now are back in that future price batch. You can come up to your cost batch, hit that, all 29 items from there. So all we did was import in a batch, a cost change batch from the vendor, and we associated a price batch to match it. And we used in that price batch two different ways to calculate the price in the system. For items without a TGM, we input the margin that we were looking for, and then for those items that had a TGM already in the system, we just segregated them out and used that TGM and the new cost to come up with a new price point. That's pretty cool. Well, that's it for this week's tip. Hopefully we've given you a couple cool ideas that you can utilize within your own store yet this week. Until next time, have a great day.